Congratulations. HBKU. So he actually was recommended by one of the board members of QSTP, so I Googled him and said, wow, this guy is brilliant. I want to meet him anyway. And so he kindly agreed to give a talk on the topic of entrepreneurships. But I want to tell you, when I mentioned his name in Qatar, everybody told me the same. Wow, he was a winner of the Star of Science, right? So he was really good in entrepreneurship technologies. So of course I badgered him, I asked him, how come you don't do the startups anymore? And he said, this is precisely the reason I want to go into research and figure out what's the challenge in doing entrepreneurship. So this is a talk, actually I think I should pay him to give me this lecture. So maybe had he given me this lecture, I wouldn't come to QSTP and be the president. But thanks to all of you, we have a lot of things. Now usually I do advertisement. If you walk around, you see the autonomous last mile vehicle. You have a sharp eye. You also see that we have the robotic charger for EV vehicles. If you come again next week, you see a boat somehow, somewhere at QSTP, autonomous. If you have even sharper eye, when you park the car, you see a van that's very weird. There's no steering wheel, because that's our autonomous bus, minibus. And then we have more robots. I think where's the Kanshan guys? So we have a robot to do pick and place. We have a robot doing logistics. So a lot of exciting things. So commercial time, and then you should see the bee farm. They have this dashboard that's really cool. So we're going to display that. Outside, we're going to display some of the other cool technologies. So I hope that whatever you decide or tell me the bad news that nobody should do entrepreneurship here in Qatar is going to be false. We're going to have an intensive debate about that, because otherwise, if you tell me it's hopeless, that's also okay, because then I'll just tell my boss, my board, that it's because you have a local PhD graduate that is hopeless, so since it's hopeless, I'm just going to come to the office at 7:30 and leave at 3:30 and collect my paycheck, right, and take the annual leave. So certainly I'm not going to do that. All of you, by now, you know me. So welcome, Dr. Mohammed. I really look forward to hearing your wisdom. Thank you so much.
Our findings in the research group in HBKU, as Dr. Jack has kindly highlighted, I had some entrepreneurship experience. Unfortunately, a lot of my endeavors were not successful, so I decided to study entrepreneurship in Qatar to understand why it's challenging to have a startup in Qatar. Brief introduction about sustainability, economic diversification, and entrepreneurship. And then we'll talk about the entrepreneurship framework, some of the benchmark economies that we have studied, and other ecosystem along with some of the study results. In the end, we will conclude with the strategic recommendations and action plan. So as an introduction, as you know, Qatar is, alhamdulillah, a very wealthy country. We have the largest single non-associated gas reserve in the world. We are the largest LNG producer. However, as you are all aware, hydrocarbons are a finite resource. So in time, that resource is going to deplete, and then we need to find something else. So dependency on natural resources is not something that economies would want to do for a long time. Another thing is that we know that the largest single gas reservoir in the world is going to last us for 100 years. But you also know that coal, for example, is still here. It was prominent in the early 20th century, but since better alternatives came, now coal is almost obsolete. I would say it's not worth much. Same thing can happen to gas. Maybe in a few years from now, renewable energy is gonna, there is gonna be a big leap in the cost and the efficiency of the renewable energy, where it will slowly replace the gas. In the past few years, Qatar was focusing a lot on changing this. We are using a lot of our oil and gas money to invest and develop the entrepreneurship in Qatar. We have a lot of supporting institutes, accelerator programs, but as we will see later, we did not see a big or a significant change and the revenue streams or and the economic makeup of Qatar based on all of those resources that are being spent to develop entrepreneurship. So the basic question that we are trying to answer here is why we are not very successful in changing that. And what you see here on the bottom is a relationship that we'll try to build out through the presentation. Basically, the relationship of entrepreneurship to the private sector, to the economic diversification, and ultimately to achieve sustainability. So, sustainability, there are a lot of definitions for sustainability, but mainly it is meeting our own needs without compromising the future generations' needs. So we need to have enough of capacity to flourish without impacting the future generations, nor having something that is highly volatile, highly susceptible to failure at any point in time. There are three pillars of sustainability: environmental, social, and economic pillars. But there are a lot of sub-pillars, but mainly in our topic here we'll be focusing on this definition along with the economic and the social pillar. So looking at economic diversification and how it's relevant to our topic, on the left-hand side we have the rentier economy, which is like Qatar, like the GCC countries, where we have few natural resources, few on quantity, not on the quality. The economy is not renewable, it's not sustainable, it has a low efficiency. To move to a more sustainable and economic diversification, we need to shift from this single natural resource dependency to a multiple independent human-based resources. And for that, we will need to have an economy that is based on human capacity. It is diverse, it is renewable and agile, so therefore it is highly sustainable and highly efficient. This is just an example of how a rentier economy looks like, where the vast majority of the income comes from a single resource. So what you see here is almost 80%, this is just an example, 80% of the income comes from hydrocarbons. Therefore, if the oil and gas price goes down, then the whole economy goes down. If it goes up, then the economy will flourish. On the other hand, a more sustainable economy will look like this, where there are multiple sources of income. A lot of them are human-based. So if one resource is impacted, the other resources will still carry the economy. Next, we'll talk about entrepreneurship. Now I'm giving definitions, we start linking them later. Entrepreneurship is the opportunity of the pursuit of opportunity beyond the resources control. It is very hard for a startup to evaluate how much income it's going to make in a few years. And this is the essence of entrepreneurship, is to pioneer a truly innovative product that its future value cannot be measured at this stage in time. Usually, this is why startups are always high risk, high reward. But there are different models for entrepreneurship. You can pioneer a new product, you can devise a new business model, create a better or cheaper alternative of that product. But it's not easy, as you are aware there is a high risk associated with entrepreneurship. Out of 100 ideas, only one of them usually get successful enough to be realized. Now, you will see a few of this during my lecture. I don't like to talk a lot, to be honest, but I'd like to also give you a break from listening to my monotonous voice. So throughout the lecture, we'll have some discussion breaks, small discussion breaks, where I'll start engaging you guys, I hear a lot from you guys. And then here, this is just some trivia. We have here Qatar, Amazon, and Apple. Anyone can guess what is the revenue of Qatar?
400 billion. 400 billion.
How much?
Yes, 400 billion. Any other guess?
Couple of years?
USD dollars.
Was around 43 billion, something like that, 41 billion.
Close? $70 billion. Anyone can guess what's Qatar GDP?
Oh, revenue, GDPs.
I think
300,
Yeah,
maybe 300.
Freight 85.
240 billion. Of course, it goes up and down, but roughly in that range. Then anyone can guess the revenue of Amazon?
Something like that.
I'm not afraid of science.
120.
Billion? Anyone can guess the market cap of Amazon?
Say 3 trillion.
What about Apple? Revenue of Apple? 98. Apple market cap.
3
It was
trillion.
3.7 billion.
3.5 trillion.
You see here, Qatar is the largest producer of LNG in the world. And our revenue is less than a single company of the largest companies of the world. This is the power of innovation. This is the power of entrepreneurship. And this is why, like, depending on natural resources can only take you so far. We need innovation. We need entrepreneurship. Anyway, that's the break. Now we continue with our presentation. In this section, we'll start looking at the psychology of the entrepreneurs and the situational drivers of entrepreneurs. There are many theories in the field about entrepreneurship regarding the psychological drivers, what drives people psychologically toward entrepreneurship. Some of the three most prominent theories is first, we have Maxwell's theory, basically divides people into three categories. People driven by affiliation.
But from the previous slides, I hate to argue, it's not a fair comparison.
Yes.
Because for $3.7 trillion, Apple will sell it to you. Qatar is not for sale for $3.5 trillion. So I just want to state that.
Yeah,
You know,
okay.
a sovereign revenue takes a diversity. Amazon is what we call high volatility market cap.
Yes.
So they take a lot of risk.
This is, yeah, you're right. 100%.
So because if you ask me to buy Qatar or buy Apple, I'll buy Qatar.
So the idea here is to show the power of innovation.
Exactly, of course.
That's so. Looking at the psychological driver, Maxwell's divides people into three categories. People are driven by affiliation. This is the sense of belonging to the group. Okay, if my tribe does like that, I'll do like them. If the society does like that, I'll follow them. Basically, the following of the trends. And according to Maxwell's, those people who follow the trends, which is unfortunately many here, not here in Qatar, is the people who are least likely to become entrepreneurs. People who are more likely to become entrepreneurs are people who are driven by achievements or sense of power. Achievements is the biggest psychological drivers for entrepreneurship, followed by power, and then after people who are driven by affiliation are the least driven people toward entrepreneurship. We have some other theories like locus control theory. This is a very famous theory. It applies to different fields. It's about thinking that your life consequences are a result of direct actions, your direct actions, or versus people who think that everything is outside there, like is not a result of their action. For example, the picture here is just briefly explains this theory. People who think that they failed the test, they failed because they didn't study enough, versus people who think they failed the test because the test was too hard. And this is an important factor in entrepreneurship. Another theory is the action regulator theory. This is about the mindset of people who are continuously trying to improve themselves. Those are the people who are more psychologically driven toward entrepreneurship. Then we look at situational drivers. Situational drivers is divided into two categories. Necessity-based drivers and opportunity-based drivers. Necessity-based drivers are classified as people who did not have a source of income before they started their entrepreneurship journey. And there is a direct correlation between the necessity-based drivers and the unemployment rate. So what you see here in pink is the unemployment rate, and the blue is the number of necessity-driven entrepreneurs. They are directly correlated. On the other hand, we have opportunity-based drivers. Those Those are classified as people who had a reliable, stable source of income before attempting their startups or entrepreneurship, and it is of course non-related to the number of unemployment, basically percentage of unemployment. Now, can you tell me in Qatar which one is more relevant to us? Exactly, and this is important because a lot of the successful models for entrepreneurship around the world, most of their entrepreneurs come from areas where they are driven by necessity. You cannot just copy-paste that model into Qatar because it wouldn't apply. For us, most of the people here in Qatar have, alhamdulillah, very stable job, very good income. You cannot just copy that like the US model into Qatar or some of the other countries' models into Qatar. We need to develop our own model, a model that can trigger the opportunity that people in Qatar can see so they can pursue it. And I wouldn't go into details here, but this is some of the defined skill sets that are required for entrepreneurs. Of course, that doesn't mean if you don't have all of those skills, you will lose, or you will fail in your entrepreneurship journey. But the more you have, the better you are, the higher your chances at succeeding in your endeavors. And it is divided into both competitive competencies like knowledge, attitudes, more like resilience, perseverance, and some of the skills like communication skills, interpersonal skills.
So, sorry, so you're going to hate me because I personally think that in terms of attitude, because we're a people-oriented economy, I think integrity, I will put that higher than it will be a very important ingredient. At least that's how I look at entrepreneurs. A lot of people forget about integrity. They just think that if I have the drive to make more, of course there are exceptional cases, but we're not promoting drug cartel and all that. We're promoting sustainable enterprise.
Yes.
And integrity, to me, is even more important, if not as important as the list that you have provided. As a comment. Yeah.
I would say it is of course important, and it wasn't identified, to be honest, from us.
Oh, we can write a paper
something
together.
is taken for granted that people should be.
Oh, you're in Qatar, you can say that. Yes, of course. Of course.
Yes. But yeah, obviously, this is like a very basic, fundamental behavior that everyone should have. Now we look at education, because later you will see some of our recommendations is to integrate entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial education into the early stages of education. But this is why I need to briefly explain that there are two different things that just mixed up a lot. Entrepreneurship education and enterprise education. So entrepreneurship education is more related to how you build and operate your business organization. Like I need to get this registry, I need to have a CEO, operation manager, business development manager, But enterprise education are more related to the skills that we have seen in the previous slide. It's more related to personal skills, knowledge, and on the right-hand side, this is a little bit of a complicated chart. I'll try to explain. But on the y-axis here, you have the education level from preschool going into higher education and then work life. And on the x-axis, you have multiple things. Basically, on the left-hand side is the more practice-oriented learning. On the right-hand side is more the academic learning. So when you start the preschool, primary school, then you learn through practice. You get to shape your skills, your behaviors. Things like resilience, integrity are all built in the early stages of life. Then you go to higher education, high school, university, where you start to get your declarative knowledge about the world, about the systems. But at that point in time, then most of your skills and attitudes are already formed. Now, if you start only focusing on this area, you will miss a lot of the skills and attitudes required for entrepreneurs. But what happens after higher education? Then you go back to work or to your business, and then you again start to learn through practice. But what happens at this point is you start failing quite often because you didn't develop the right skills required from the early stages of education. This is why one of the suggestions you will see later is to try to focus not only on scientific and academic knowledge, but also on building the skills of our students since early childhood. Another discussion, right? Relationship about how much you invest versus how much you're going to gain with time. Of course, there's always some uncertainty with business. But when you start a very innovative product, or a product that is relatively new in its field, then it is very hard to predict your growth. Very hard to have a tangible number of how much you're going to get after 3-4 years. It's still in an idea stage. And this is the power of innovation, because you might start something that no one believes in, but after 10 years you start becoming the most successful company in your field forever. You see what happened now. Snapchat is a multi-billion-dollar worth company. Now for Sunun, he began as a he took the model from other delivery services like Delivery or Talabat and all of this. But his value is in adding new products. So have you seen some of the latest options in Sunun, like the group order and all of this? So he's trying to innovate in that. So now for our discussion break, what do you think is the most critical value an entrepreneur brings to a startup or to his company? Effort and knowledge, funding and the vision. I would say as an entrepreneur, the only thing that no one else can bring to your company is your vision, is your ideas. You can get funding from a lot of places. You can get the effort and support from multiple team members. But the idea itself, the vision itself, has to be done by you. And this is integral to our idea of building an entrepreneurship model for Qatar. We need to provide to entrepreneurs in Qatar the effort, support, and the funding support so they can focus on the vision. And this is essential for opportunity-based drivers. If it's necessity-based driver, the entrepreneur will be willing to go do all the work he can, try to get as much funding as he can to realize his vision. But for opportunity-based drivers, it is very difficult to make someone who's being paid really well in some industry give out his work, take the risk, and start up his startup. And whenever there is a certain constraints in the market, the government will need to come and try to solve that specific constraints. For example, if it's a limitation on the imports, a limitation on the airports, then the government will need to do that. Now, more about the role of the private sector in economic diversification. It helps drive economic growth, pay taxes, create job opportunities like what we've seen with Amazon and Apple. And there are 3 different levels for private sector. The micro enterprise, those are small farms, businesses with less than 10 people. We have the small medium enterprises, and we have the large enterprises like Google and Apple and all of those. Now, research have shown that for high-income countries, the majority of the companies are small to medium enterprises. It is very successful for the economy to have a large percentage of its private sector as SMEs. Now, of course, this does not apply to GCC, and mainly because in GCC we are resource-based economies. And here we see the SME, the small medium enterprises contribution to GDP is much smaller in the GCC than, for example, the EU average. And here we're looking at some of the benchmark economies that we try to learn from, and it's important that we need to learn from those economies. We cannot copy and paste their models, because each economy has a different context, entirely different context. So looking at Norway is widely considered as a very successful example of a country where they were able to transit successfully from oil-based economy into a more knowledge-based economy. they have some of the fundamentals in Norway is that they are highly culturally homogeneous people. They have a very strong decision-making foundation system. Just a brief story here. Norway discovered the oil and gas in the late 60s, early 70s. Before, like the acronym or the name Dutch disease came, Norway already had a solution for it. Are you familiar with the Dutch disease? Okay. So the Dutch disease is an economic phenomenon. When some of the economies around the world discover a new resource like oil and gas, then they put their whole focus on that field. High salaries, for example, all the attention, all the budget goes to developing to this field. What happens is because they are so much focused on that resources, people in the other sectors, the highly competent people in other sectors, they leave them, for example, the ministries, all the other companies, to go into that sector. Now, this helps that sector flourish, but in the long run, it destroys the other sectors basically, because you have all the competent people in the country stuck in one place. And that's the Dutch disease. Now, Norway solved that issue before the acronym was used in explaining this phenomenon. And this is done that by, basically they put all the great minds in Norway together. They said, okay, we have discovered a lot of oil and gas resources. How can we use them for the best of the country? And they have had a certain actions. For example, the oil and gas field income will be used to develop other sectors. They did a salary compression system, so there's not a big gap in the income from the oil and gas sectors to the other sectors in the field. And that's one point. The other point is what Norway did also is they linked the universities to the industry. So they said, okay, we discovered a big reserve of oil and gas. Now what are the needs of that sector? For example, drilling equipment, drill bits, rigs, whatever. Then they went to universities, because they invested a lot in educating people. And then they said, okay, the problem is there, the need is there from the oil and gas sector. The education and the knowledge to solve this problem is there in our universities. We will bring the money so that all three together will start forming startups. So you see a lot of the manufacturing companies in Norway are related to oil and gas. And this is based on this idea, how to have the solution and the problem all within the same country. Now there are some similarities to Qatar and differences with Qatar highlighted here, but this is a snapshot from 2021 of the share of Norway's oil and hydrocarbon share of GDP, so only around 15%, and only around 20% of the income comes from oil and gas. Next, we're looking at Singapore. Singapore earned independence from the British in 1963. Their GDP per capita was less than $300. Most of the people were unemployed. There was lack of water supply, infrastructure, sanitization. They were so poor back then that after their independence, they didn't know what's the way forward, basically. So they decided to go and join Malaysia. I don't know if you know about this, but Singapore joined Malaysia. And 2 years later, they were essentially kicked out from Malaysia. So no one wanted them. Then the father, what comes next is a very inspirational story. Lee Kuan Yew, the father of modern Singapore, he said we need to find a solution. He was driven by necessity. So what he did is he sacrificed some of the freedom for autocracy. So people didn't have full flexibility in the press. He was fighting corruption with an iron fist. He wanted to destroy, basically to kill the corruption in the nation. He also, since Singapore lays on Malaga port, are you familiar with Malaga port? It is one of the, it's actually the busiest port in the world in terms of trade weight. So he said, this is our cutting edge. our location. How can we harness and utilize it fully? So he started creating legislations to attract businesses around the world to Singapore in order to start building the business environment, making use of that location. Multinational companies, global corporations came to Singapore. When they came, he offered them a lot of incentives in exchange of them teaching and helping the Singaporean people develop their skills. After a while, he had a very educated number of people. He started making his own money, Singapore started making their own income. Today, Singapore GDP is more than $80,000 per capita. It is the most open economy in the world, and the third is corrupted. It had two large sovereign wealth funds. Those sovereign wealth funds initially were used to develop its own entrepreneurs. Now it reached a stable point, so it started expanding to invest elsewhere in the world, and it has more than 10 million visitors annually. Now, and here we are highlighting some of the similarities and differences with Qatar. I will not go into details here. Next, we look at Qatar. This is an entrepreneurship institution map of all of Qatar. All the higher education institutes, accelerators, co-working spaces, fundings, all that you see it here. We have a lot of programs that support entrepreneurs. But as I said, the results are not really big, really significant. Some of those programs have been there for the past 15 years, but there's not much change we see. And now we look into the literature of why this isn't happening. So basically, according to the Economic Forum and Global Entrepreneurship Model, some of the issues highlighted in Qatar is access to financing and regulations, government policy and financial support. It didn't make sense to us. Why a lot of people are complaining about funding even though we have a lot of programs to fund basically entrepreneurs in Qatar. This is another basically data set from GEM, and again, financing entrepreneurs, government policy are ranking really low as an enabler in Qatar. So there are issues here. Now, looking at Norway, Singapore, Qatar, we looked at other benchmark economies, but focus now on those two. This is a table that shows what are the common factors and common challenges. And to be honest, looking at this, strong business-friendly policies is really clear as a challenge. Qatar and an absent success factor. Discussion. So, do you think Qatar has a strong education system?
Yes, Qatar has a strong educational system. They just need to be more proud of it.
First step to improve is to, what's the word? Is to know that maybe there is something to improve first. So yes, it's much better than many other countries, but I think there's still a bit more improvement there.
So I think this question itself needs further clarification. So you mentioned about Singapore, for instance, or any of the former British colonies, including Hong Kong. The focus back then for the education system is to train knowledge civil servants, frankly. So the focus is on bachelor degrees, not on research and development. So if the question is whether we are knowledgeable, literate, or frankly to say, and to train people so they can think intelligently, then yes, undergraduate systems are more than sufficient. However, if the topic of the discussion is for 21st century entrepreneurship, which oftentimes requires deep technology research, postdoctoral and PhDs, especially in the field of science and technology, then this is a this is something that I'm sure you're going to talk about.
Actually, excellent answer, Dr.
Well, thank you. Do I get an iPhone 16?
Okay, so we had a lot of discussion on this in our research group. And I'll take myself an example. I'm not planning to brag, but please listen to me. So for me, from high school, I graduated at the top of my class. I joined Texas A&M and Bachelor in Engineering, followed by Master's and PhD in Sustainability. I was an honor student, straight A's, got patent in a hybrid solar power system, awarded so much in Qatar that I didn't have a place to place my trophies. I stuck them in a box. So all my education was done in Qatar. Next step was to benchmark my education as a sample in international fields. I participated in multiple exhibitions and gold medals and all of them, alhamdulillah. So this tells me that education is good in Qatar, but is that the purpose of education? To just get the certificate and go get awards and that's it? Let me continue the story. Right now I work in the oil and gas industry. I'm leading the planning. I'm being paid 80% of the education that I have done. If you bring someone else, I can probably do with a business background or finance background, then he probably can do a better job than me. And to make it worse, in a few years, since I'm not practicing what I learned, I'm going to forget everything. So all the money Qatar paid for me to go through all this education journey will sprout. Another example is I've attended many demo days in Qatar. There are some ideas, like graduating student ideas that is really worth a startup. Unfortunately, 2-3 years later, I met them in the oil and gas, they were approving workflows. Is this really the purpose of education? To go, to finish, get your certificate, and find a job? This is exactly what Dr. Zahar said. In terms of academia, I think we have a very strong education system. But the system itself is not built in a way, the integration of education into the culture, into the ecosystem is not built in a way that people who have been well educated can contribute to the most of their potential. So we see a lot of people, I'm pretty sure some of the people in this room are extremely well educated, extremely competent, but they are limited to their work life. Let's have a simple work, stable job, and that's it. And this is the problem. This is where I think is the problem. The outcomes of education is restricted in the research field in Qatar. It should go, should exceed that boundary. Any comments?
Well, this is a tough one because a perfect entrepreneurship circle, you normally need visionaries and technology specialists, which in terms of visionaries, actually you don't need education period. So Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Meta, unfortunately they are the wrong example, but they do very well, right? So we can find a lot of cases about visionaries that they only need the raw basic instinct and some talent. For the workforce in technology, for TIC-TAC, you need a lot of education or research. But once you go down, then you need extremely competent people that I believe Qatar is sufficient. Yes. An example would be something like the Taiwan TSMC. So you always have a bunch of PhDs, but those guys who operate the machines, as long as they are competent, they know the basic. It's not dissimilar to what you see probably at Shell or Qatar Energy, I would imagine. I've never been to Qatar Energy. So when we talk about a strong education system, as I said, if the fine print is about entrepreneurship, then it's really not the top or the bottom that I quite worry about. Usually it's the person who has the deep tech and experiences and understanding of what the industry needs, which requires years of experiences.
So what do you think Dr. Jack is like a good solution or a good one? That's what we're looking at.
Well, you asked the wrong person because I'm trying to figure it out. I'm learning as well. But since you mentioned Norway and Singapore, I would think that, for instance, the case in Singapore, because it was a classic British colony, which is strong influence, and Lee Kuan Yew himself was Cambridge educated. He was a lawyer, right? So it depends on what kind of entrepreneurship that we're addressing. So there are many places that have strong entrepreneur spirit, but they are in merchants. They are more on, I call it application layer. Fintech, but application layer. Trading, application layer. They are not inventing something, or in your previous chart, that would mandate a high PE ratio like Amazon. Amazon, the market cap is way higher than revenue because of the price to sales ratio. Amazon is sometimes not even profitable, but people have high hope. So I feel that we need, unfortunately, to do all three in order to sustain.
Yes.
Right. Accountant doesn't need a PhD, frankly.
Yeah.
Right.
But like the example of Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and those are outliers.
Exactly.
There's 99.999% of the people who did not have good education, they are not doing well.
Exactly.
So when you
Unfortunately, they're the celebrated examples all the time.
yes, but the idea here is you increase your success chance if you have a good education system in Qatar or in any country that can contribute to the industry.
But you're right. You're right.
So in here, so after looking at the literature, we decided to go and look at the field directly. So we had hands-on interviews with many people in Qatar, focus groups, surveys, to get some of the results. I'll briefly discuss them here since we're almost out of time. But yes, here are some of the drivers that was identified by the people in Qatar, where the idea, where the vision source came from. Some of them from their education, some of them from international businesses like Mohammed Al-Housani, got it from Allah, market needs. They identified their needs and their challenges. Most of the highlights here is related to regulations, legal system. A lot of people in Qatar, they would have a startup, they would win a very big contract with one of the big companies in Qatar, and they would focus all their resources on that contract. At the end, they will not get paid, or there will be a delay in payment. Unfortunately, when the startup goes to the court takes 2-3 years to solve that issue. By that point in time, the business is already closed. So even if they get it in the end, he lost the business, basically. So those are some of the issues highlighted by the people here. Rent, like the rent is really high, so people are not willing to go and pay that rent. So this is why there's a bigger need of incubation. I wouldn't go through the details here, but yes, some of the findings that access to financing. So our research validates what we have seen from the literature in terms of enablers, access to funds, and ease of starting. And this is like built in, it is intrinsic to our culture. Like there's a general expectation that the woman take care of the family, and in order for a woman to go out that boundary into entrepreneurship, she needs her husband, her family to be supportive. The basic idea here is that very young people and very old people are more driven by passion. They are more driven by having an impact on society, while people in the middle ages are more focused on financial gain and independence. And it makes sense. People start their life with a big passion, they want to make a big change, then they get married, they start having responsibilities, then they start focusing on the financial aspect, and then when they retire, their children are old and independent, then they start focusing again on what they want to do in life. Again, some comparison of the drivers for marital correspondence agendas. I will not go into the details here. Financing options. Of course, people prefer to have grants. They don't want to pay it back. But yes, this shows the most favored form of financing. Partnership comes next, shared risk partnership comes next. Now, the question here is discussion break. What can we do to empower women into entrepreneurship?
We don't want to empower
Women here, the ladies do not want to say anything?
I told
Maybe a woman.
I think they agree.
Actually, I believe your question should be how we can empower women to take a role in the entrepreneurship, because there's a lot of businesses, they require women or female touches to make it more powerful.
I think you like my opinion on this. So there are some women who already went into entrepreneurship and they're successful, but the culture remains there. Our unique culture remains there that woman is the main member of taking care of the family. So instead of going and forcing women into entrepreneurship, we need to develop our own model for women. So our ladies in Qatar, they are well educated, they are well paid, but they don't have the time to go and become entrepreneurs. They have the cultural boundaries. So our opinion is that for the ladies, they should adapt more to the investor model. If they get the chance to use that income and investing in other business, they can become owners or co-owners, but they can still focus on their families. So there is a lot of unharnessed potential in our ladies. 50% of the societies are ladies. They go and work, but majority of them, their money, also for the men, this is applicable, but the majority of them, their money gets spent on brands, on cars, on life, not necessarily the wants, other than the needs. So if they have a strong model where they can, an institute can facilitate the investing process for them, I think it will trigger a lot of women to go and use their resources to contribute to the economy.
Yes.
This is the basic framework for Qatar. What are our needs? What are the key market players or key players of the government, sporting institutes, the people, and what is the goals of the entrepreneurship in Qatar? Increase the number and quality of entrepreneurs, support the growth of entrepreneurs, attract investors, all of this, those are our goals. And here we're looking at the push factors, the process, and the pull factors. So the push factors are more about creating the real source, creating people who have strong tendency and like a lot of skills, a lot of good behavior that supports entrepreneurs. The process is more related to how to convert these people into entrepreneurs. And the pull factors is more about how to make those entrepreneurs scalable, or how to have those startups scale into success. So the push factors, we have like the education, the legal committee, the rapid committee. This is a special dedicated committee that helps business disputes. And the process, how people can help, how the government can help people convert into entrepreneurs, basically control the rent, improve the legal and regulatory system, digitize the process, from the supporting agencies or institutes, again, clarify their acceptance criteria. A lot of people were complaining that supporting institutes did not really clarify their criteria. Some of them complained that even though they are entrepreneurs, they are being judged, their ideas being judged by people who have absolutely no idea what is entrepreneurship. It's just their role is to judge entrepreneurs. And then the pull factors, the government need to enforce a minimum purchase limit. Supporting agencies need to develop their networking venues, their investor relations. I will not again go into details. There's a lot of information here. I don't want to bore you again, but if you are interested in one aspect, I can explain more about it.
very deep.
Then we're looking at some of our strategic recommendations here. One of our strategic recommendations is to have a free zone with a twist. So basically the free zone will offer all what a normal free zone offers, but it will not be geographically restricted. So people from anywhere can join and use some of the benefits of that free zone, with restrictions, of course. Okay, you cannot offer incubation to someone in Shimal, but you can offer some of the tax exemptions and all of this. Also, the way it is built, the funding will come from the government, will come from the corporations in Qatar using the community service clause. The problems also will come from the corporations in Qatar, oil and gas, QDB, whatever. Any issues, they should come to the free zone, and the free zone will have a dedicated relationship with the investors and with the universities, so that the people in the university, the highly educated people or entrepreneurs, can find some of the solutions required by the industry in Qatar. Women also can make use of the free zone through the venture capital funds. They can join, and people will manage their money at basically at fixed rate of income or annual income or dividends. Another one of our strategic recommendations to have Riyada, what we call Riyada. This is a platform, an application basically, that offers everything that entrepreneur needs. Some of the services offered is already in Madrash, but basically through the application you can do all your government services, bills, you get notifications for expiring visas or industry information. On the banking, you can pay salaries, your employees' salaries, contracts, you can sign through the application. For supporting Institute Single Window, we have many accelerators in Qatar, and most of them, they have one goal. They want to help people become entrepreneurs. So they have the country in it. Okay? But me as an entrepreneur around Qatar, I really don't care who supports me. I need the support. Why do I need to jump to QDB, QCB, Qatar University, whatever, just to get the funding I want and find a suitable program? This all should happen in the back end. So on the front end, I need funding, the program will ask me a few questions, and then it will direct me to the right accelerator or program. And there are some other programs, like you can apply for tenders, you can do payments, employee transfer, and all of that. Of course, there are some advantages to the system. We have explained most of them, and there are challenges to both Riyada and TQ free zone. And this is mostly, there's a need for strong funding and government support. And here I wouldn't go to details, but this is a roadmap of the action items that we have assigned to improve the entrepreneurship, what Qatar needs, what the government needs to do in order to improve the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Qatar. On the x-axis we have the duration, and the y-axis the impact, and this is based on our survey results and interview results. Again, we have a roadmap for supporting institutes, and a roadmap for the business sector and society. At the end, we have what are the risks to the implementation. There is a cultural challenge, I would say. This is mainly driven by people are resistant to change. People usually focus on the short term. They want a stable job now. They don't want to go and have a risk, even though having that risk will change their whole life in the future. There's a lack of trust in new initiatives, and there are judgmental view on people that quit their job to go seek entrepreneurship. Of course, the mitigation for this is through education, having a slow change, and time. Another challenge we have is the expertise. We need to have the right people to implement those actions in the best way. The vision is not enough. We have very strong visions from our leadership, and Qatar Vision and the Qatar National Development Strategy, but the execution itself needs to be really well. Again, the mitigation for this is to attract expertise and ensure knowledge transfer, education system, external trainings, and of course, the process needs time. Another discussion? Joking, that's the end of it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammed. It's actually, this is the first time we talk about policy in these lectures. Normally we talk about AI and robotics, so you broke the trend. And I'm so happy that you have the time to come. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed. So lunch is being served outside as usual. Please linger around and badger with all the questions and ask him to invest in your stuff. He told me that now he's not doing stuff, but he actually, you know, I'm running a ChatGPT. I don't capture the sunrise. I heard two things. He's very welfare, very well paid. That's what he said. He's an investor. He does not do entrepreneurship himself. So, guys, you're talking to someone who has experience, interested in invest, and has the resources. Go ahead. Qatar Energy, I was told, pays very well, and they never fire anybody.